Graham Potter has been sacked by Chelsea. He's lasted 31 games in the hot seat at Stamford Bridge, but his tenure there is over. It felt, I think, to most Chelsea fans that this is overdue. It felt like it probably wasn't going to happen, Sam, but it is. Well, it has happened. What now?
Yeah, it didn't feel like it was going to happen because, I mean, they've been sort of clinging on and hanging on, haven't they, for a long time this season. It's rarely felt excellent, and yet the message from the club has been pretty consistent in them, investing in a long term project and building and keeping faith. And we've been taking Todd Burley's comments quite seriously there because he keeps repeating them. But at a certain point, you hit a breaking point, right? And Saturday evening was the breaking point. They were really bad, weren't they? They were just really bad. And it's a very complex debate. It's not all about Graham Potter. A lot of it lands at the feet of the Chelsea ownership, the new ownership group, and the strategy and the decisions they've made. But the bits that he's been able to control, I think, have been underwhelming, just as much as some of the decisions above his head that have been made have been underwhelming or quite poor and badly thought out as well. I mean, where do they go from here? Bruno the Brighton beard is going to be seemingly on the touchline and in the dugout for the next game. You can't imagine that's a long-term solution. I feel like they've pulled the trigger now because you look at the table and they're so far away from the Champions League places that top four is now basically impossible. I don't know what the percentage odds are, but they'll be less than 5%. So now the only route back into the Champions League for Chelsea is winning the Champions League. And so you ask yourself the question, can Graham Potter win us the Champions League? If the answer is even close to no, which it absolutely should be and will be, then you've got to throw your last dart, haven't you? And see what happens. Fling it. And so I don't know what happens next, but I think we know it's not going to be Bruno cracking on and taking this job till the end of the season. I think they'll probably try and do something. The identity of that man, I don't know.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting. I mean, Dino tweeted at the weekend saying there's been a lot of stuff around Chelsea that Graham Potter was not in control of. And I've absolved him of some of the blame for what's happened on the pitch because of the off-field issues that have kind of permeated his entire tenure. But what happened on the pitch, he can control. And the decision to play James and Cucurella as sort of left and right centre-back with Badiashile, who's been excellent really since he's come in, on the bench, with Trevor Chalobah on the bench, and Ruben Loftus-Cheek right wing back. It just felt like one of those moments where even the things within Potter's control have suddenly slid into an area where it all looks very, very negative.
It was funny. Before the game, I saw a couple of people were tweeting about Reece James and saying, oh, this is a good idea, actually. It deals with the threat that Aston Villa will offer in terms of pace and Ollie Watkins. Like, Reece James can keep up with him and keep track of him. I was like, what? Why are we at the point where Chelsea in a home match against Aston Villa are so concerned about Ollie Watkins that they are going to turn one of the best right wing backs into the game into a right-sided centre-back to make sure that he doesn't pose as much of a threat? That is absolute nonsense. And that is turned out obviously not to be a good take. But I think people were trying to find reasons to give Potter the benefit of the doubt. It's been an absolute shambles. I mean, the decisions that Todd Boehly's made since coming into this club, quite frankly, horrendous. Like, to first of all get rid of Thomas Tuchel and allow that relationship to deteriorate to the point that you got rid of him, and then to replace him with the Brighton manager. I mean, at the time, I was quite clear about the fact that it was a laughable decision, and I was just shocked that somebody could actually believe that that is the right way to move forward with a football club. Like, it was not really anything at that point against Graham Potter. It was like, no, like, you can't do this. And then Graham Potter got a lot of time, really. I mean, if this was Abramovich, say, like, Potter would have been gone months ago. But still, he's had a 5-year contract that Chelsea sounded like they were going to be happy for him to at least get a fair crack of. And here we are 6 months later, and he's gone. So the attempts to stick with him were a waste of time anyway. So they've wasted a season here. they are going to try and claw something back by trying to win the Champions League. It's not impossible because Nagelsmann is out there. I know the initial feelers have been put out there to see whether he's interested. Obviously, you've got to buy him out of his contract at Bayern Munich. Well, there's one club we know aren't going to have any qualms about paying money for people. That's Chelsea. And it just makes me laugh, really, that Burley put himself in a position. He was fine. Thomas Tuchel was absolutely fine. If you could have just repaired that relationship and sorted things out, you had one of the best coaches in the game. Now, what's happened is that Thomas Tuchel has gone into Bayern Munich to replace a bloke that Chelsea are probably now going to go after to become their manager. That's how ridiculous this has got. And when you look at it like that, you're like, okay, so if we're going to rank these, then Thomas Tuchel is the best, yeah? And we decided we didn't want him. Good stuff. Good stuff. Also spent ridiculous amounts of money. A couple of people tried to defend Potter on that. I tweeted that it's one of the worst managers in Chelsea's history. And someone said, well, hang on, you obviously didn't see Chelsea in the 80s and 90s and stuff like that. I did, but they didn't have Kai Havertz and João Felix and Enzo Fernandez, did they? Like that, you cannot compare a Chelsea manager from the 1980s to a Chelsea manager that has the most expensive squad we've ever seen assembled. So, no, that doesn't compare. I'm sorry.
Chelsea were good in the 80s and 90s. They didn't come from nothing, but they were never this good. They were never this
Hang on,
rich.
Chelsea were not good in the 80s.
Chelsea
were terrible.
They were okay in the 70s.
Yeah, Chelsea were bad.
Kings of the Kings Road and all that.
80s into 90s was a bad time for Chelsea, and then they started to fight back early 90s, like 94 or something like that. But
they've never been like this, have they? They've never
nothing like it. Like the 70s and stuff. Yeah, the 60s, 70s they had a bit of a go at it, but yeah, it was never. They've never had glory like they've had since Abramovich came into the club. And that's the expectation that fans have these days. Like Chelsea elevated them to a point which they're never going to be able to come back from. That is always the point at which they will now be judged. And the fact is, Graham Potter came into Chelsea, and since that time, he quit Brighton, who are now on the verge of the Champions League spots, and he's taken Chelsea into the bottom half of the table. That is almost impossible to do. So he's a failure.
Yeah, well, his stock's at an all-time low, right? I think that is very much clear.
He'll be fine. Look, the right project, he'll be fine. Like there are plenty of clubs out there. Like to be honest, even Tottenham wouldn't be the worst fit in the world. That's not the worst fit. Are they willing to risk that because it looks rubbish right now and like his reputation is so bad? Like it doesn't look like a good move right now. But to be honest, like Graham Potter isn't the worst fit in the world for Tottenham. If they want a bit of an overhaul and a project, like it's a better fit than it ever was for Chelsea. So,
yeah, I'd agree. Right, let's get on to some of the questions that we've got on this. This is from Darius, who's clearly quite pleased about the decision. He says Ben Chilwell deserves better than this. Enzo Fernandez deserves better than this. Reece James deserves better than this. Has any club ever made a worse in-season move than Chelsea did this year, sacking Tuchel for the most clueless guy walking the planet? Who the hell do they go for in the summer? Has anyone ever done so little with so much at their disposal? Should he ever work again?
Well, if you want to go in-season moves, look no further than Nathan Jones to Southampton, my friend. You think you've got it bad? Spare a thought. I
once remembered Fulham taking Felix Magath at one point. That was a bad one. So there have been some like Sam Paoli at Sevilla. It's not been great, is it? Like,
nope.
There's plenty of bad moves that happen every year, and it doesn't mean that any of these coaches are completely dreadful, but I think that we've come to a point here where it just looked like this was inevitable is the wrong word considering the backing of the ownership, but it felt like the fans had decided this become inevitable, and that's not a good place to be at any given season.
No, not at all. Atmosphere around Stamford Bridge starting to turn, obviously. Atmosphere online, ferocious, and again, don't underestimate how difficult that arena can be. And Potter's talked about getting death threats. It's a high pressure job. It's a horrible situation sometimes, and people could take it too far. But the word toxic can be applied to the kind of general atmosphere of it all over the last 2 to 3 months. And it doesn't feel like a particularly happy place, does it, Chelsea, overall? Like, you've got these massive question marks hanging over Mason Mount and his contracts and his form. He's Chelsea through and through. He's the player that this club is kind of built upon. and there's big question marks over him. There's been question marks over the manager, basically the entire time that he has been there. They don't have a number 9. They don't have a consistent goal scorer. Like it's been really weird, hasn't it? Really, really weird. You think a club with that much investment and that many good players, you'd think it would just be working okay, but really none of this has worked. This club has not been operating properly the entire time.
I mean, to be fair, the Mount situation could well turn around quite easily now, because that was a big problem. Like I know that they are a crossroads in terms of like what money Mount wants compared to what Chelsea have offered him so far. But that's really a point of Mason Mount wanting his status within this squad reflected, and he doesn't feel it is being fairly right now. It's not that he wants to be the top earner at Chelsea. He just feels like he is genuinely important to them and wants them to accept that. And also, but since Graham Potter came into the club, the use of Mason Mount has just not been effective at all. Like the roles that he's been used in don't get the best out of him. He's even been left out a little bit recently. And
he's also not been playing very well, right?
But he's not been playing well, mate, because he hasn't been used in the right. This is his argument. Like he has not just fallen off a cliff. It's coincided with Graham Potter coming into the football club. Mason Mount's been one of Chelsea's most important players in the last 3 years or whatever, and he played a very specific role in that team. And that was kind of taken away by Graham Potter and tried to use him slightly differently. And it hasn't worked. And that's why Mason Mount, and rightfully so, has had to think, hang on, if you are the manager for the next 5 years, can I actually remain as part of this? Because I can't progress my career. I'm 24. I'm in the England squad. Like, I know the levels I can play at. I've scored big goals in the Champions League, Premier League. If you don't want to play me in the position I want to play in, I'll go and play for Liverpool. Fine.
Yeah.
Well, but I don't think that'll happen now, to be honest. I don't, I think everybody does want this to work out.
If he'll get his very specific position at Liverpool, if this is what we're saying, do Liverpool will play the exact style that has the exact position that Mason Mount needs to play? No, this is the thing. Like, Mason Mount was always told as this kind of bastion of versatility. Oh, he can play in the front 3. Oh, he can play in centre midfield. Oh, he can play as a 10. Oh, he can play as an 8. And then suddenly, when a manager comes in who changes it slightly, he's like, well, I can't do that because I've been played out of position. Okay, right. We're talking about players not turning up for a manager. And look, there's been plenty of reports out of Chelsea this morning about people not knowing who Potter was, who had to look him up, had to make jokes at, the expense of his name. That's obviously not a good thing in terms of, a managerial prestige. But also, I think that there are plenty of players in this Chelsea squad who can look at themselves and go, yeah, I didn't give my best during that tenure. And I think that some blame has to fall within that remit as well.
You got to respect the manager, mate. And this was another problem that Todd Boehly, the mistake that he's made. You can't have a team of superstars managed by a bloke they've never heard of. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. Arsene Wenger managed to do it once when he came in from Japan, but Arsenal weren't the Arsenal that we grew to know. It's very rare that you can get a manager that hasn't been a big name come in and win over a dressing room that easily. And Graham Potter, lovely bloke, lovely man. He as far as you and I are concerned, in the world of these people, they need more than that. They need to completely have to have an aura about them. Basically, if you're going to go into a club like Chelsea, you've got to have something special about you. And Graham Potter, a very smart man, no doubt about it, but he hasn't got that pizzazz or something like that.
Even Zidane probably would have struggled to keep everybody in this team happy because, as we know, the squad is too big, it's so bloated. And, they've had to deregister players for the Champions League and things like that. And those training sessions, honestly, they must look like Woolwich bus stop at times with 80 people.
It's like playtime. Everyone runs out with the ball and you just start picking teams and running around.
It honestly is ridiculous. How do you whenever he selects a squad, he has to leave 10 players out. Now, obviously, some players are going to be injured or suspended. That's just the nature of it. But probably he has to turn around to 5 senior players most weeks and go, "You're not in the match day squad. Sorry." Or, Badia Shield, sorry, I can't register you for the Champions League. Aubameyang, I'm going to try and send you to LA because I just haven't got a place for you. That, that's hard to handle. And then those players being unhappy, that sows the seeds of discontent. And it's hard to come back from. It's really hard to come back from, just to veer away from Chelsea ever so slightly. Mikel Arteta has done amazingly to come back from this. He managed to ship out everybody that didn't really like him. and get a handle on this. And he probably doesn't get enough credit for managing to do that. Aubameyang, by the way, one of those people. It's really hard to come back from. Not many people do it, and Potter hasn't been able to get a handle on it.
Okay. All right. Last question sort of on Chelsea, and probably more generally on Potter, to be honest, before we move on. From Sam, who says, with Chelsea losing again, yet creating the majority of the chances and always having more possession, what is their XG and how badly are they underperforming it? Is it the type of chances being created or the execution? And Sam, I know our friend Harry Brooks has a theory on this, that Potter's teams create high XG chances, but actually chances that aren't particularly useful for their forwards to actually score in. And it looks like we've had a second go round the merry-go-round, a second bite of the cherry, if you will, where the same thing is kind of happened at Chelsea as it did at Brighton last season.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I don't know. I look at some of the chances they've missed, and I'm like, it doesn't matter who you are. How have you missed that? You know, there's been a couple like that, and again, some of it's to do with the fact that Chelsea, for all the players that they've bought over the last 12 months, and they've bought some great players, they haven't bought any elite finishers, have they? In fact, they've bought a load of players that are really good at almost everything other than finishing. And, we can talk about Kai Havertz there for sure, but Joao Felix, if he has one weakness, it's scoring goals. He has consistently missed chances throughout his entire career. He's awesome at loads of stuff, but he's not a proper goal scorer. So I kind of have a little bit of sympathy with him there because he doesn't really have an answer. The answer actually is Aubameyang, but whatever's happened there has happened there. So I think Harry is sort of right, but also there are some mitigating circumstances here. I'm just trying to look up the XG, which is 35 XG, 35.7, 29 goals. So it is a pretty chunky underperformance, particularly by Chelsea standards. Like, you expect the top clubs to overperform their XG by probably about the margin that Chelsea are underperforming it, actually, thinking about it.
Which basically means that a 6-7 swing on either side. So you're talking about a 14 XG swing, which is a lot. That's a lot of goals, and that's a lot of games and a lot of points. And actually, it's a bit uncomfortable reading. But again, it's another XG underperformance from Graham Potter, and at some point that's going to have to be looked at, I think. Just as a final point, if you were Todd Boehly now, either of you, who would you appoint as manager for the rest of this season? Dean, do you want to go first?
It would be Nagelsmann or Luis Enrique. Like, they've just got proven pedigree as top managers that can handle a dressing room and actually win things. Nagelsmann probably got a little way to go yet because he's 35. But yeah, one of those two guys.
Sam?
Yeah, they both fit. They both fit really well. I'd go for one of those two as well.
Okay.
Nagelsmann, ideally, I think, because I think he has the chance of lasting longer, of being that sort of 5-year man that
he also gets to play Bayern Munich potentially in about a month. So
yeah, sure.
That's why I want it.
Tuchel versus Nagelsmann in the Champions League, Chelsea versus Bayern Munich. Who'd have thunk it?
Yeah, that would be what a game.
What a game it would be. Also, Nagelsmann hates strikers famously, so actually this Chelsea squad might just fit for him. So we'll see.
So does Lucho, to be fair.
Yeah, everybody hates strikers. Get them in at Chelsea.
Not looking good for Lukaku, is it?
No, not really.